Welcome to Create If Writing, the podcast for writers and creatives dealing with the passion and the practice behind making good art. I'm Kirsten Oliphant, your host, and you can find more at createifwriting.com. I want to take a moment to thank the sponsor of the show, Audible. There's nothing I love more than the feel of a real book in my hands. But that's just not my everyday. Right now, I do a lot more listening as I'm driving around to my car or at the gym or shuffling the kids around the house. Audible provides a great way to listen to your favorite books. With over 180,000 titles, you will find something that you love. To support the show and get a free trial, visit audibletrial.com/createifwriting. In this episode of Create If Writing, I'm talking with Sarah Steidl. Sarah is a blogger and also an editor. She has some really good tips for editing, when you need an editor, what kind of things you should look for in an editor, and what are some tips for self-editing and resources to do that. Editing is one of those things that, I don't know, it's not the most glamorous thing that we think about with writing, but it's one of those just so important facets of writing that we need to master. We need to get better at doing it ourselves. And we also need to get better at paying people to do it. Because I also think it's one of those spaces where we know we need help, but we don't want to pay somebody to do it. In talking with Sarah, I feel more and more convinced that some of the work that I have previously done myself really just needs to be in front of somebody else's eyes. So listen to the interview and see what you think. So tonight we're talking to Sarah Steidl. Hey, Sarah.
Hello.
How are you doing?
I'm doing fine, thanks.
Excellent. And Sarah, she does a lot of things. Sarah wears a lot of hats. Sarah is a writer and a blogger and also an editor, which is what she's going to be talking to us about today. And she edits at Soleil Editing. Is it just Soleil Editing?
Soleil Editing, right.
Okay. And you also just helped launch a new project this year, which I've been really excited about, called Grace Table. And you are the editor at Grace Table, correct, and a writer as well?
That's right.
Tell me a little, this is just kind of a brief aside, but tell me a little bit about how that got started, because that's sort of a collaboration of bloggers and writers coming together, which is kind of unique, I think.
That's right. So Grace Table is a contributor site. It's founded by author Chris Camille. You can find her writing at chriscamille.com, but she brought together a group of 15 or so contributors that we explore the biblical hospitality. So what that means, to open your heart and your home to others. And the writing is beautiful, the stories are beautiful, and she's really done a great job of bringing together multiple voices to bring that topic to life.
Yeah, it's a great site. I've really enjoyed, I subscribe to the email, so I get the posts in my email. Which makes me more likely to read them because sometimes I'll forget to go to sites otherwise if I'm not subscribing. And there are just always some great challenging posts. So do you get to edit all of those posts and do you see everything kind of before it goes up?
I do get to see everything before it goes up. So I'm usually, in best case scenario, I'm the last person to see it before it goes live. And it's one of my favorite things because the writing talent at that site is so great. And like I said, the voices are so varied that it's a little treat that I get to take part in before it goes live. We post 3 times a week and there's always something new at the site.
It's a great site and there really is a lot of variety, different voices, like you said, and different. You wouldn't imagine that there are so many takes on hospitality, but there are. And so
that's right. And I have to tell you, I'm not the best at being hospitable. I'm the person who forgets to even ask you if you want a drink when you come in.
I totally do that.
So I didn't know how this was going to work out, but it's stretching me and growing me to be more selfless when I invite people into my home. So it's been great.
Excellent. Well, that kind of leads into some of the things. I'm getting all these fired up questions about editing as we're talking about this, but I want to talk a little bit tonight about editing because it's one of those things that I think all writers struggle with. We all need editing, whether we're self-editing or hiring someone or having a friend edit. Everybody needs extra eyes. Tonight, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about some of the ways that writers can better edit their work and how editing works as a process and how that looks for you to work with people. So thinking about Grace Table, especially, do you find it fulfilling? I mean, I'm guessing you do. Do you find it fulfilling to be an editor of other people's work?
I do. So I'll start by saying I I didn't know that I wanted to be an editor. Growing up, I had writerly tendencies that I think all writers have. Like, I was a voracious reader. I would rather stay inside and read than go out and play during the months of summer. I was always writing stories and that sort of thing. Diagramming sentences in sixth grade, that's
Wow.
when I knew that words were my thing. That's when the word nerd really came out. So I knew that I was a word person, but I thought that writing would be my passion. And so I do have my day job. I'm a communications director in higher education, and I've been in healthcare. And so writing has been what I do, and editing kind of came about in my the previous position that I had. I became a supervisor to people, and so I was looking at their work, providing feedback, and I found that when I was doing that sort of thing during the day, that I would get lost in the time. So the time would just race by. And when I moved to the position I'm in now in higher education, it's a little less hands-on what I'm doing. And in 2012, when I took that role, I realized I really missed that. And so that's why Soleil Editing began in 2012, because I missed that part of my work. So that's how I discovered that I loved editing. And I do love the process of seeing someone's raw and uncut writing and helping them to clarify their message, clarify their story, but do it with their voice. So it's a challenge that I really enjoy.
And I feel like not everybody can do that, because I've had people read my work and they try to change it, like professors specifically, I think sometimes.
Yeah, and I think the reason that I am able to do it is because I've written speeches for presidents of companies. I edit all sorts of communication, and so I have to take other people's writing and edit it in a way that it's understandable to people, but it's not my work. And so I'm used to doing that in my day job. And so it's just natural to me.
Well, do you feel like as a writer, because I know that you blog and write as well, do you feel like it makes it harder for you to write or easier, or do they compete or kind of work together? Or how does that look for you?
I wish I could say that it made me the best writer ever, but it takes me a really long time to write things, especially if I'm passionate about what I'm writing about. I self-edit as I go, and I'm trying to get better at that, but it does hinder my writing a little bit, I would say.
Well, what is it like to actually work with somebody then? Like, if we have some people who need to work with an editor, do you have tips for good working relations with an editor?
I do. And first, I want to talk about when you might want to hire an editor.
That's a great question. Yeah.
So you definitely don't need to hire an editor every time you hit publish on a blog post, for instance.
Good to know.
Yeah. But my rule of thumb is, if you plan to charge for your writing, if you want people to pay for your writing, you need to have it professionally edited. There's nothing worse, in my opinion, than paying for something and then seeing typos littered throughout. Not that it's, not that the content can't still be good, but if you're charging for it, you should definitely have some professional eyes on it. With that being said, the first thing that I would suggest when you're looking to work with an editor is to know what you're wanting that editor to do. So are you wanting content or developmental feedback? Do you want them, for instance, to comment on how your writing is, how the flow is, if you need to clarify the message somewhere or the storyline kind of breaks? Or are you looking for just strictly proofreading, line editing, things like word choice and typos and grammar? If it's content feedback and kind of developmental feedback that you want to expect some rewriting on your behalf. So the editor would go through your work and provide comments and feedback. And so then there'll be more work on your behalf. If it's everything under the sun that you want, that content and developmental feedback will be the first stage of editing. And then once you get your manuscript to where you want it, then that's when the proofreading comes in. So all of the I's can be dotted and the T's can be crossed. But again, I would say the first thing to do is to make sure you know what you're looking for, and then to make sure that before you enter any agreement that you know that you're both clear on what's expected.
That's great to know. And I think sometimes people get that sort of the editing process backwards, and they make everything look perfect, or they work really hard to make everything look perfect. And then they need these substantive edits where they have to change whole things. And then they just have to do that again. Not to say that Well, I guess I don't know. Maybe you do. Do you get things from people that are in like really, really terrible shape, or do people? I mean, and would you suggest kind of cleaning it up? Should it be
Yeah,
somewhat clean when they send it to you, or just
I
like, here you
yeah,
go?
I would suggest it be in a final draft form that you're proud to share.
Okay.
So you don't want to pay for edit after edit after edit, right? So
Yes.
I mean, if you've got an unlimited bank account, maybe that's okay.
Yeah. I know I've heard horror stories about some writers, not as much maybe modern, but some from ages past, and that would, write all this stuff in longhand and then not edit and refuse to do it. But I feel like publishing is really in a different time where that's just, I mean, unless you're someone that's hugely bankable, I
Right.
don't think you can just go in with like a legal pad and be like, boom.
Or let me dictate to you while you type my
Yes, no, I don't think that really happens anymore. Maybe every now and then somebody who's really a little bit, crazy and also a little bit rich. So
right.
those people might be able to get away with it, but I'm not sure that happens for the normal person trying to do this. So when would you suggest, are there people that can edit themselves, or when would you suggest doing self-edits? I mean, other than sort of your rule of thumb for if you're selling it, like, are there people that you would say can self-edit, or?
I definitely think there are people that can self-edit. My role at Grace Table, we talked about earlier, there aren't many typos that I get to fix in that site because those writers are pretty polished. So there are definitely people who can self-edit, and there's, for things like blog posts, there's no reason to have an editor look at it. But I would say if you're pitching to a publication for an article, or if you are looking to guest post, I would have some people in your circle of writer friends who are willing to look at your work before you submit, because even if you don't want to pay someone for editing, that second set of eyes is really important. But I do have some tips for self-editing.
Yes, I would love those. Tips are great.
Okay, good. So the first thing is, when you have your final draft, you think it's pretty good, you think it's where you want it to be, let it sit. And I think a few days, 1 or 2 days is ideal. If you can just let it sit for a couple of days and then come back to it, that's the best. If you can leave it for a couple hours, great. If you're on deadline, and the best you can do is get up and get yourself a drink, glass of water, and then come back to it. Whatever it is, however much time you have, let it sit. And when you come back to it as if you've never read it before. Pretend like you're your audience and it's all new to you. And what you'd be doing is reading for clarity. So this is when you would be finding things like, I got too wordy here. And so that's when you cut, you slash things right out of it. And as a side note, one of my nicknames at work is the slasher.
The slasher. Excellent. Excellent.
So I definitely am great at cutting extra stuff. But you might find that when you're reading it with this fresh look, that you actually didn't get your message across like you thought you did. So you may have to add some things in or rearrange some paragraphs. After you've gone through that and made the adjustments that you need, let it sit again for as long as you can, if it's just an hour or even less. And when you go back to it, if you can print it out, that's ideal, because looking at it on paper, you catch more than on screen. But my suggestion is read it out loud and slowly, and focus on each word, because that's how I, as an editor, will find pesky typos that exist. That you've written it yourself, so you know what you think it says. So it's not until you read it word for word out loud that you can find words that you've missed, or a double word, and that sort of thing.
That's a great tip. You're reading out loud. I think sometimes too, you find places that trip you up. It may say what you want, but you may find even you over your own words are kind of, and then
Exactly.
not maybe like that, but you find that you need to rearrange some things or put words together in a different way.
Well, I can tell you, I find typos everywhere. And my favorite ones to find are in the New York Times bestselling authors' books, because it just reminds me that, we're all human. We all make mistakes. We all miss the typos, and it's going to happen. But, the less it happens, the better, right?
Yes, yes. Well, are there any other practices or tips that you can suggest for writers, kind of as they're writing? Or are there any good resources, or how can people get better at kind of creating more polished work to begin with?
So I have a few resources I like to, my go-to resources, but the first one is the Grammar Girl podcast. That is actually
yeah.
the first podcast I ever listened to back before I even knew what a podcast was. And I still listen to it. I think she's relatable. I think that if you're a word nerd, it's enjoyable. But she's got good tips. And what I like about her is she is thorough. So when she's explaining why something is more right than something else, right? So there's all these different style guides. And so depending on who you're writing for, if you're writing for a publication, they use various style guides. So that's another tip, that if you're hiring an editor to edit something that you're submitting to a publication that uses a specific style, you definitely want them to let them know, because they can adapt what they're doing. And actually, that's one of the first things I like to ask, because I like to know what the rules are that I need to be following.
Yes. And I don't think everybody knows there are different rules, and it's everybody gets very set on their rules. Do you have a particular, we did Chicago Manual of Style in grad school, so I kind of,
right. So my Chicago Manual of Style is on my nightstand.
That's amazing. This makes me I already had respect for you, but I feel sort of like, yes, you are totally awesome, because that's on your bed. If you don't know, if you listening have not seen the Chicago Manual of Style, it's like, you could kill somebody with it. It's huge. It's huge. So
you don't need a baseball bat for intruders.
It's a giant, giant book. The opposite of that, and I don't know if this is one you were going to mention, but I love Strunk and White, The Elements of Style, which is a tiny, tiny book.
That's right.
I used to kind of keep those two next to each other on the shelf, because it was like the giant everything, you could use it to defend your life kind of book. And then you have the very, very tiny and very thorough and just crisp and clean version of Elements of Style, which always seems relevant. What are the other ones? Is there AMA and MLA? Are those totally okay?
Yes. And then for people who are in the news world, there's AP Style, which, I mean, it breaks all the Chicago Manual of Style rules. So
yeah, we can't have that. I got to stay with the CMS. But there's actually a if you're in writing groups online, which I suggest that you should be in a writing group online. I'm in a few of them, and there's a post somebody shared today, and I actually shared it. Sarah, you read it as well in a different group, but the girl who wrote the post that I will share, she was talking about just different mistakes that people make. And there was actually, when she shared the post in a Facebook group, there was this giant thread that happened where everybody started fighting about literally and figuratively. And it kind of was nice at first, but people, you could tell they were like digging their heels in, like, we will not change, because literally means it is actually true, and figuratively means it's sort of like a figure of speech, like it's not actually true. Like if you say, I'm literally on fire right now, that would mean you are
stop,
actually, stop, drop, and roll. Don't tell us about it. You should probably find a source of water close by. But I think that there was, I don't know which dictionary or who decided this, who are the gatekeepers of words, but last year I think they decided to make literally also mean figuratively, because so many people use it that way.
Yes, they do.
Which, I know language is always changing, but that one really killed me. And so anyway, people started fighting about the use of literally, and how it was really a hyperbole, and people knew and what it meant. And I was like, I'm pretty sure teenagers do not know.
Right.
No, I shouldn't say that, teenagers listening, because some of them do, but there are a lot of people who throw the word around who I think if you said hyperbole to them, they'd be like, yeah, I don't know that one either. Anyway, I think it's interesting how passionate, even people who may not think, oh, I'm a good editor, oh, I'm interested in words, how passionate people can get about some of these rules. So Sarah, what would you suggest if somebody needs an editor? Where do you find editors, and how do you know if the editor is going to be a good fit for you?
Well, so first of all, I'd say word of mouth is a great way to find an editor. If you are in writer groups like you recommended, it's a great way to find editors that are trustworthy. So word of mouth is a great way, and word of mouth is how I get a lot of my clients. But the other thing I would suggest is, just because someone has used an editor that they really like doesn't mean it's a great fit. And I think fit is important. You want to look at the types of things they edit. So for instance, I do a lot of nonfiction, creative nonfiction, and Bible studies and that sort of thing. So I'm really good at catching verses that people quote, scripture verses that people quote that aren't, the references aren't right. So that's kind of those kind of things. So that's important. But you want to look to see what their body of work is, and if it's what you're wanting them to edit, because that's what they're most comfortable in. So word of mouth. I mean, you can do a Google search, but I'll tell you, word of mouth is definitely the best.
Okay.
I mean, you've got people who are into sci-fi and romance. They could be one editor, but chances are the editor has something that they really excel in.
Yeah. Well, I'm asking this of everybody who comes on the podcast, but I want to end with the last question, which is, what is inspiring you this week? And there's no pressure to have some kind of like fancy answer, although it's great if you're inspired by something beautiful like sunsets this week. But if it's something else like, the Real Housewives of wherever, that's fine too. We won't judge. We won't. But what's inspiring you this week?
You know what's inspiring me this week? And it is so superficial, but I'm so excited about it. I am a nail polish person.
That's okay. That's okay.
And glitter on my nails makes me smile and it makes me happy. And recently on Instagram, I posted a picture of my shiny, sparkly nails, and I followed it up by saying, when I was in my late 20s, I had this self-consciousness about what will people think if they see glitter on my nails? Will I not appear professional? And then I realized, now that I'm 34, somewhere in my early 30s, I realized, you know what they're going to think of me? If they see my beautiful nails, they'll think she likes glitter. And so
that's a good realization to have.
Yeah. And so I posted that, and I inspired one of my followers, and she tagged me in a post today. She's turning 28, and it's her birthday. And so she got glitter on her nails because she's in that self-conscious, what will people think of me? So anyway, that's what's inspiring me today. Doing what makes you feel pretty.
I like that. And I'm going to share a link to your Instagram as well, because you have a beautiful Instagram feed. And sometime I'll have to tell you about the time that I tried this week to do, I don't know if you've seen the videos for this, the nail polish where you drip it in water and then dip your finger into it. Have you seen this?
I have seen that.
Yeah. So clearly I was missing some steps because that I did not have.
Your fingers just got wet.
My fingers did not just get wet. They got covered in nail polish. All of them, like fingertips, everything. I think they're still blue, but so nail polish is not inspiring me this week, but I totally appreciate finding beauty, whether it's that small thing, and embracing it and not caring if people think you're professional, because clearly you're very professional and you do a great job at your job editing and have shared a lot of great tips with us today. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
So, having listened to the interview, are you convinced that you need an editor? Or do you still feel like you're pretty good at self-editing? Or are you in the boat where you know you're not good at it, but you also don't want to pay somebody to do it for you? Since I recorded this interview with Sarah, I've handed over one of my pieces of writing to her, and I can't wait to get it back and see her suggestions, although I hope she's gentle. Be gentle with me, Sarah. I think that's another fear we have of editing too, is it just crushes us when we make mistakes. But as she said in an interview, even bestsellers make mistakes, whether that's a proofreading thing or something that we need clarity in. We all make those mistakes. We all need an editor. We all can use that help, and we don't need to take it personally. And so if that's why you're afraid to use an editor or have even a friend look at something of yours, get rid of that fear. We need this help. It's great to have that extra set of eyes. And if you can't, for whatever reason, I hope her tips are helpful. Do you have a blog? Are you starting a blog? Are you thinking about blogging? I want to recommend the host that I've been using for 2 years now, Bluehost. They have been fabulous anytime I have issues, which really hasn't been often, but anytime I screw something up or have a question about how stuff works, Bluehost has been there. I've never had my site crash, and I've never had issues. So if you're looking for a host or a new host or unhappy with your service, try Bluehost. You can sign up by going to createifwriting.com/Bluehost. I hope this was encouraging to you in your writing process, and I hope you have an inspired week.